so let's pick it up on how Jackie Burroughs is the
Yeah.
related character.
In terms of her hair being done in this helmet format, she had a very strong opinion as to how she wanted to look and play the part. And I found at a certain point that a performer always puts so much of their own persona into the role that we went with it, and the directors all went with it. And eventually she created a character that was very dynamic and that the writers had a tremendous time writing for. We could always put her in any situation, and she was always pepper in the mix. She could always create a dramatic situation just because of her approach into it, which was generally confrontational. So she was always a good character to mix into any situation and have a dramatic resolution. We had all kinds of romances for her, romances that never worked out, romances that were upstaged by other people. She became a kind of a poignant character too, because she wanted her life to fit into a square box, and yet her life was anything like that. And she was very unconventional, and in a way very much ahead of her time. Not that dissimilar to some of the things that Lucy Maud Montgomery experienced in her own life at that period. But Hedy is the cartoon character version of that. Anyway, I think over the course of the series, though, she has loosened up a little bit. And I think the children in particular that we've often played opposite her have had a lot to do with that, because that particular mix of an older person with a younger person, which was very much a Montgomery style, works very well dramatically, in that frequently the younger people are able to relate to her better than their own peers or any other adult. Because she is so much older, they're able to debunk her a little bit, and she allows that to happen because underneath that tough exterior she's got a golden heart, and that's why she's been such a magnificent character to write for and to work with.
Okay, now let's talk a little about Sarah, and how Sarah at the beginning was the focal point pretty much of the series, and then how her character kind of evolved.
Well, Sarah Polley was the actress that was cast as Sarah Stanley, and Sarah Stanley was written as the focal character. She was one of the characters in the Story Girl books, and I think in some ways everyone was always looking for another Anne of Green Gables. The problem with Sarah Stanley's character was nothing was ever wrong with her. She was an heiress, she inherited all this money, she got thrown in with these relatives on Prince Edward Island, and gradually over the course of the series, Sarah just became part of the fabric of the family, and she stopped being the focal point of the series, I think in a good way. Sarah Stanley, the actress, I think in the course of growing up over the show, kind of became bored with acting, and the writers had a hard time writing for her because she was just too perfect a character. And so other characters tended to upstage her and become more interesting in the mix. The whole relationship between Felicity and Gus upstaged everything because it was a romance and it sort of took off. And so Felicity's character had to be written with much greater dynamic and much more complexity. So it was an interesting evolution as to the character that was originally designed as the focal character really became an ensemble and frequently a background character, and other characters who were supporting performers often became leads. So that's another just kind of eclectic mix that kept the show fresh. But I think Sarah gave some absolutely magnificent performances over the course of the show. She's a very accomplished actress. But the combination of writers finding it difficult to write for her at times, and I think her just being under contract and being assigned to every single show was not a good combination, because I think at times she perhaps didn't turn in the best performances, nor were the shows that were designed to feature her always the better shows.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Zachary Bennett and the character Felix, and how you cast him at the beginning.
Okay. Zach Bennett walked into my office to audition for the part of a 10-year-old in a movie that I was doing 6-7 years ago called Looking for Miracles. He came in and lied his way into the audition. He was 8 at the time and convinced me that he was 10. In the end, it didn't matter because he had a wonderful sense of reality about him for his age, and an incredible innocence that was totally appropriate for the part that I was casting. And I had such a terrific experience working with him on that movie that he became a natural for this show, and we very much wanted him to be part of it. And I always believed that he would have star power to a certain extent, because he was a dynamic actor who brought a wonderful sense of his own personality to the roles that he played, and was always able to accomplish them with incredible dexterity for his age. And so he became Felix in Avonlea, and grew up on the show like all the other child performers. But Zach, I feel, always has a special place in the show, because he's the kind of child performer that has never been jaded by the business. His family, fortunately, has kept him that way, and because other siblings of his are actors, they all reverberate off each other, and they all keep each other humble. And I think that's part of the process, and that's why he has, I think each time he's approached a role, he's approached it as if it's his first and his last job. So he's put his heart and soul into everything. And it's been just terrific to see some of the things that we've given him and to see what he's delivered back. He's got a great sense of comedy and a wonderful sense of dramatic poignancy. I think he's just a really accomplished little actor that is now a young man who I hope will have lots of other performing opportunities in front of him, because I really think he has the talent and the stamina to continue on.
Okay, and lastly, for characters, let's talk a little about Gemma and how Felicity was, what kind of character she was at the beginning, and how she's kind of now become more of a focal point, and how she evolved with her relationship with Gus. And now in the last season, Gus is presumed missing, and now she's trying to deal with that, and got this relationship with Stuart.
The whole relationship between Felicity and Gus, which started off in season 2 when we decided to create a real character that was outside of our family, in the form of Gus as a young working class boy who had no family, who was basically a castaway who kind of ended up in Avonlea working at a cannery, and finding his heart through Aunt Hedy and realizing that he could be something better than what he was. And being taken in by the King family was an incredible setup. A small little soupçon of detail within that setup was that he had kind of an inkling for Felicity. Well, that grew into Wagnerian proportions in terms of this relationship that was on again, off again with Gus and Felicity. And it was one of those things that I never would have predicted would have been part of the mix of the show. But every time a writer came in to pitch that relationship, there was always a wonderful sense of drama about it. Everybody embraced it, and they loved Gus and Felicity because she was such a hard nut and so horrible to him that there was a real opposites attract type of relationship brewing there, and it just grew and grew and grew. But what happened was that we always had to set up somebody else in the mixture. So first there was the young veterinarian Pettibone that came into the mix, and then he was turfed by Felicity because she really loved Gus, and then she couldn't make up her mind about Gus, and she didn't know what she should do. And it was an on-again, off-again romance, as many things are in life with those kinds of individuals. But with Sarah leaving the show, that relationship kind of almost tended to eclipse everything else, and everybody was very keen on exploiting the Felicity and Gus relationship. So we just kind of went with it and developed all kinds of different things to happen in their lives. And that involved Gus's ship being wrecked at sea, and Gus being found blind in the Caribbean, and or pardon me, it was changed to South Carolina, where he is found in a mission, and how Felicity brings him home, and how she has a relationship with somebody else that then she has to call off because she's practically at the altar, and then she has to call it off because her true love is Gus. It's an interesting dynamic, and it makes for very interesting shows, but they do tend to be somewhat potboilerish and a little bit soap opera-ish, and I wouldn't say that they were my favorite shows, other than the performers themselves were always so good at what they did. And Gemma Zempronia grew so incredibly as an actress because the writers started to write her in a very complex way to explain her personality in terms of how she could be in love with Gus but still not sure about him. So it brought a great dimension to her character, Felicity, and Gemma really rose to the occasion, I think, in terms of so many of the performances that she's given in the part, and setting her up as deciding to go to medical school and then really having to give it all up in the end for Gus was a pretty big arc for a girl at that time, and probably even more unconventional than the character of Hedy. So it was kind of the sort of relationship and the kind of character thing that blew out of proportion to a little bit, except that audiences like great romantic relationships and great drama, and so we just kind of allowed it to happen.
Okay, lastly, I just want you to talk a little about some of the awards that Avonlea has received. I saw those awards down there.
Yeah. Avonlea has received a number of awards internationally. It's been very well recognized around the world in numerous festivals in Europe. It's been nominated, I think, 6 times for Best Series for Cable Ace Awards. It's won 3 times. It's won an Emmy for Best Children's Programming. Christopher Lloyd won an Emmy for his performance on Avonlea. Numerous other performers like Stockard Channing have been nominated for Emmys for it. It seems to be kind of an all-round show that's good for nominations of any kind, and generally wins a good number of them for things like costume design and art direction, all those production things that are important because they're very well done. But I think the awards are important and interesting and give impetus to the creative group that work on it, and our recognition that what they're doing is in the right direction and is recognized by the entertainment community at large. But we try to be very careful about those awards and not let people think that they should be doing something just to win an award. They're really, in the end, we're playing for the audience and trying to capture their imaginations.
Okay, can I just have you set up, in case I use some of that footage where you're directing the episodes?
Oh, yeah.
Set up how you were directing, when the show first started, you were directing the episodes and how your role has kind of evolved.
Well, when the show first started, it was an unconventional approach to television again. If a show came in and it looked a certain way in the cut and I wasn't happy with the cut, I would always go back out and shoot more footage and make sure that we were well covered, because sometimes in the course of the evolution of a show, it exists one way on paper, and then it's something else by the time it's all cut together. And many things that look good on paper often don't work in a final cut. So I would say for the first several seasons, I was fairly intensely involved in making sure that the shows in their final form of delivery moved the audience to the extent that I had expectations of the script. So if I liked the script and then the show didn't make it in the end, we went back to the studio and shot more, back to the location, and tried to make sure that the shows were perfect. Gradually over time, you establish a certain rapport with directors and writers, and then the need for that kind of goes away. But occasionally it still happens. We'll get a show in and we'll just say, well, this wasn't what we expected at all. Let's go back to the boards. And sometimes it's easier when you're actually looking at a cut of the show to say, yes, now I think it should be a little bit more this way, a little bit more that way. And we've been fortunate on this series that we've never been stymied by a conventional approach to producing a series, both with our Disney partners and our CBC partners, to having to exist within a very rigid framework. So that luxury has been there. I think the show has certainly benefited from it, and probably benefited from all my gardening techniques and trying to weed out the bad and try and make sure that only the best gets in.
Okay, that's all I have. I'm sorry
Good.
I took more of your time.
No, well, I'm the one who talked. We managed to to really do shows that are really consistent all the time, you know, and okay, you're rolling? Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about
Everybody around the world has said, why is this the last season of Avonlea? Why wouldn't you just let this show continue on? Well, there are a number of issues that are involved in it. Some to do with the performers, because as these kids have grown up on this show and their lives are now changing and they're moving off in different directions and they've become different people as performers than they were in the beginning is one reason. But I think the most important reason is that I've always had a feeling about watching television in general that when it risks becoming an imitation of itself, when it risks being a copy of a copy of a copy, and when you feel that as though you've perfected that particular format or genre, then you should immediately stop, because you only risk disappointing an audience after that. And I feel that this show has had just a tremendous inertia and a tremendous amount of creative impetus in it as it's grown up, but now it's kind of at its zenith. I think we've explored the Gus-Felicity relationship to its absolute fullest. I couldn't see another Gus and Felicity show, and I think to put their relationship to bed is important. Also, the world that we're in is just about to turn into a completely different world. The time period that we're in is just at the outset, or within another 9 to 12 months, it will be the outbreak of the First World War. People's lives would be changed unbelievably, and our Avonlea group isn't even really aware of that. Felix is actually joining the Navy and will probably end up going off to war, and who knows, could get killed. So we wanted to kind of leave, as in the home movie episode, to leave a lasting, fond impression of the show with audiences. So as life in general goes on and people are born into the world and they die and things come and go, all good things come to an end, and I guess I'm a great believer in picking your end point, and I feel that a person's entire body is changed over in 7 years, and we've had 7 magnificent seasons of this, but the body has been one thing in the beginning, it's reached its zenith, and now it's time for the show to just very nicely, with lots of hoopla, finish, and hopefully maintain very fond memories in people's minds as to what it was.
Well, I know people are going to be disappointed, because people who really enjoy the show are going to think, oh no, you know, no more new series. But
well, we continue to produce new series, and I'm working on another new show right at the moment. So, who knows? Audiences may embrace that as a new concept too.
So you don't think there'll be any Avonlea reunion?
I'm against that. I'm against that kind of a thing where you keep taking it back and seeing if you can milk the concept once more. I feel that to go out on your strongest moment is kind of the best thing that a performer or writer or director or producer can do in terms of a body of work. And I feel like this is a strong moment now, and 7 years is sufficient for the cast and for the writers.
Okay, great.
Good.
Thank you for reminding me.